We've got Senator Fawcett on the line, Senator Hanson in the room. Obviously, Mr Katter, I'm Senator Hanson-Young. Don't get the two of us confused, please. And Senator Carr is here as well. Welcome you via video conference. Understand that information on parliamentary privilege and protection of witnesses and evidence has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, could you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today?
Robert Carl Katter, member for Kennedy, Queensland.
Wonderful. Mr Katter, do you have anything briefly you would like to say, or are you happy to go straight to questions?
No, I'd like to make
a short opening statement.
Statements.
Thank you. Could you just hold 1 second? Could we get Hansard to turn you up a little bit, please? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr Katter.
Christine, well, the reason that I'm particularly interested in it, I represent more post offices than any other member of Parliament in Australia, and most of the squeals are coming from my urban area, Cairns, not from the remote areas actually, urban areas. Point one and point two, I'm one of the very few people in the federal Parliament that has had the responsibilities for a bank. Cabinet allocated me responsibility for the State Bank, Queensland, and newspaper, sacked the chairman to give a lot of money out to my rich sugarcane cocky mates, to other people to judge. So I know a lot about the banking aspect, and clearly the Boston Consulting Group brought in to do a job. You don't bring these people in unless they come in and tell you what you want to hear. Otherwise, they'll never get another contract with you, of course. Now, this lady, she took a 90% pay cut. I don't know a lot of people in Australia have taken 90% pay cut. Her predecessor was paying himself over 10 million. She paid herself a bit over 1 million a year. So she took a 90% pay cut. She turned this operation, which is so important as far as I'm concerned, both from the banking point of view, more importantly, the mail distribution point of view, she turned it into a profit-making enterprise from a profit-losing enterprise. And she did the right thing by her employees. When they did an excellent job, she gave them some gold watches. Well, I thought it was a bit petty, really. I would have criticised for the other reason. That instead of giving them what they should have got, which is a very substantial pay rise, in my opinion, she got out in a cheapskate by giving them gold watches. And yet that is the reason, ostensibly. But for those of us that are cynical, and it's the conclusion of my remarks, for those of us that are cynical, look at the timeline. Boston Consulting Group is bought in. Boston Consulting recommends effectively privatisation. I'll answer any questions on that if you wish me to. And then suddenly she is in trouble. And the final thing I wish to say is that she was never sacked and she never resigned. I was in final year law and I was president of the Law Society at University of Queensland when I was there. And she made an offer to resign, and the chairman of the board made what amounted to a counter-offer. He accepted her resignation on conditions. Well, in law, that is a counter-offer. There's no offer and acceptance here. There is a counter-offer that came from him back to Christine Holgate. She rejected that counter-offer. So she was still in the position. Finally, I think the attention, Senator, I think the attention of your committee, if you people are to gain respect in the community, I'm a supporter of the Prime Minister, but by the same token, for him to appoint someone for this committee, started its deliberations, I think there's an issue of Magna Carta here. You know, is executive wing completely treating with contempt elected officials and representatives of the people. I think that it would be hard to avoid saying that's what occurred here. So, in conclusion, my very strong view is that the privatisation, the post office would be absolutely disastrous. Policy must be judged on its outcomes. In the electricity industry, Queensland, when it was effectively privatised and deregulated, price went up 300%. Same price for 11 years, then over the next 9 years it goes up 300%. The railways were privatised and the price of carrying goods went up 600%. Not for the mining sector, but for all the rest of us. The big foreign mining corporations didn't go up for them, but for us, ordinary people, went up 600%. The price of food has gone up 300% since all the food producing industries have been deregulated. In other words, it's been absolutely disastrous. And if you want to deregulate the labour market, as the Prime Minister attempted to do and lost his seat in Parliament, if you want to do that, well, they've already pushed us from $200,000 a year in coal mining down to $100,000, and they won't be stopping there. And every dollar you take off a worker, the foreign corporations, it goes overseas. So I would say that privatisation has been an absolute disaster. And the loss of our banks, I don't think I have to tell anyone in Australia that we need Commonwealth Bank as a policeman.
Okay.
So I conclude my remarks. Thank you very much. Very great honour to appear before your committee.
Thank you, Mr. Katter. And I understand you were very keen to express your opinion to this committee. I might go to Senator Carr.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Katter, for coming today. You're the only member of the House of Representatives who sought to appear before the committee, so perhaps I could ask you your response on Thursday, the 22nd of October, in response to a question from Mr. Albanese regarding the actions of the Australia Post Board and the Watches issue. The Prime Minister said that he was appalled, it was a disgrace and so on, and I immediately spoke with the shareholder minister, the Minister for Finance, and the Minister responsible, the Minister for Communication, Cyber Safety and the Arts, and from those discussions the following actions ensured: that there had to be an independent investigations done by the department, not by Australia Post, that the Chief Executive should stand aside immediately, and that an independent investigation should look into the conduct of the board and their governance, as well as the actions of the management and the executive. And the report will come back to me and to the members of my cabinet, and there are issues to be addressed with the board, then they'll be addressed then. And so appalled and shocked was I that behaviour, and any shareholder would in the company raise their outrage, that I have seen that conduct by the Chief Executive, the management of the board, they should insist rightly on the same thing. And the Chief, and I quote, the Chief Executive has been instructed to stand aside, and if she doesn't wish to go, then she can go. I'm just wondering, what was your response to that? Did you understand that to be an instruction to Australia Post?
The record reads the chairman of the board. I listened to, it's the only time in my life I've ever listened to a full proceedings of a Senate inquiry or any inquiry for that matter. Listened all day long. My notes say that he said Christine Holgate had done a wonderful job as CEO, but that we had to dismiss her. I would say, look, where I come from, you called her paddy whacker. If you say 1 minute she did an excellent job, and the next minute you said she's got to go. I mean, as I say, where I come from, they call them paddy whackers. So this bloke, I'd have to wonder about him. But he said he was directed by the minister. Now, I could be wrong. My notes are wrong. But my notes read he was directed by the minister. In light of what you've asked me in this question, I think there is some appalling conduct involved here. And I hope you people get to the bottom of it.
You're a former minister with statutory agencies under your jurisdiction and responsibilities, it is possible to direct a authority without a formal direction. Is that your experience?
You express your wishes to, as we did, case of the sugar industry in Queensland. It goes up, it goes down, and it was in a down cycle. And he said 25% of the sugarcane farmers had to go, which meant 25% of the mills went as well. The fourth biggest agricultural industry in Australia would have been decimated. And but that's what he said. So we said that no, we can borrow money at 2 3/4%. We want the money to go to 2 3/4%. He disagreed with that proposition. He subsequently resigned. According to the Courier Mail, we sacked him. Well, I'll leave up to him to decide whether he was sacked or voluntarily. But there was no doubt he wasn't there, and that the 700 million went out 2 3/4%, and we'll make 270 million profit out of that deal. They came good, it repaid the money, they were on commercial rates of interest, and we came out of it very, very strongly. But he was under pressure, I'm sure, from the banks to defy the government. And I think that's the precedent we're looking.
So is it your content? I'll come back to that. What I'm trying to go to is that the chairman of the board says, well, look, there was no formal written direction, therefore there was no direction to the board, despite the Prime Minister saying that the chief executive has been instructed to stand aside. They use those words. But the chair says, well, because there was no in writing, no legal document, that is an instruction in writing, therefore there was no direction. Is it your experience that doesn't necessarily have to be in writing to have the effect of a direction to a statutory authority?
Well, obviously I'm very experienced in this area. If you defy the will of the government, if the government has got any backbone at all, you'll be looking for a new job. And you know that. So a suggestion from the government carries the force of imperial command. But answer your question.
Okay.
Right? You defy a government advice, even advice, you're asking for trouble and you should get trouble. Executive arm is entitled to make those decisions.
You've introduced a new...
I believe it was the direction. I believe it was the direction. No question about it.
Okay, so Mr Katter, you've introduced a new aspect of this, an explanation to the proceedings here. You've suggested that the problem may well have something to do with the banks being concerned about the expansion of Australia's Post financial services. Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, very much so. And also, they resented very strongly being forced to come into the agreement, and they were, in my opinion, forced to come into the agreement, because the threat was there that if you don't agree to pay us an acceptable agency fee, then we'll set up our own bank. That threat was there, and the banks had to give in to that threat, and they didn't like it. That's my opinion. There's no way I've got to proving it. I haven't got the research staff to do that, Senator, but I think you're well on the track of what happened.
Thank you. But I'll come back to other questions if there are others.
You don't have any
We've got a limited time, do we?
We do have limited time. I want to get to the departments. So.
Yeah, look, I just put just a couple of questions, if I could, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr Katter, thank you very much for your time and for your evidence today. Like you, I'm a huge supporter of our licensed post office network around the country, and particularly in rural and regional Australia. And I do note that this was a sector, I think it's fair to say, under threat under Mr Fahua. So I'm very pleased to see a robust LPO network. But I wanted to ask you about the charge that consumers are paying for bank transactions in post offices. I've had one constituent just contact me a few days ago saying that he had to pay $4.50 per bank transaction. Now, if you're on a low income, that's a lot of money. Have you had similar sort of feedback, and what's your view about that?
Well, if you go to an ATM, I think charge is $2.50, but please don't quote me on that. But any bank transaction, they'll charge you a transaction fee. And, the bank is entitled to charge a transaction fee. one of the reasons I want to go a people-owned bank is that it stands as a policeman. I mean, if the bank does justify a $4.50, then that's fair enough that they charge it. But is it warranted? I don't think so. But, you know, let
Because isn't it
the
the case
market
that
decide, but let us know. And the only way we can ever know is to have a policeman in there. And that policeman is a people-owned bank. So
And
we
isn't
know
it-
really whether it's justified or not.
So isn't it the case that people living in rural and regional Australia, depending on the local post office for their banking services, pay a disproportionately higher charge because many transactions online actually occur at no cost whatsoever? So I'm wondering whether that, does concern you, and whether you've taken any action in relation to that charge, because it certainly concerns me, I have to say.
Well, I mean, I don't get complaints about everything. And I've got effectively 4 offices, so I don't know what's coming in and what's going out. But I haven't had complaints along those lines, but I should have had if that is the case.
Well, maybe you could take that on notice. But thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and evidence today.
Thanks, Senator Henderson. Senator Hanson, do you have a question?
Just one question, please. Mr Katter, thank you for your evidence in this inquiry. Would you be able to tell me why would the government, the Morrison government, hire DHL, which is a German-based company, to deliver the COVID vaccinations when we could have got our own Australia Post to do it? Do you have any comments to make there?
I feel like I'm a Martian in the House of Representatives. I think it's different a bit in the Senate. But how
I've seen you in action.
How you could possibly have all of the information services of the Australian military in the hands of a Chinese or any foreign government is beyond my comprehension. As Andrew Wilkie, the independent from Hobart, said in seconding the motion, he said, you couldn't make this up. I mean, it's so ridiculous that you couldn't make it up. What do you have a secret service for? I mean, what do you have a protection of your information for if you give it to a foreign corporation? But then again, I suppose if you have sold every single one of your mining companies to foreign corporations, you sold your gas for 6 cents, we now buy it back at $16.80 a unit, and we sold it for 6 cents a unit. I suppose you just sell anything, anytime at all, for anything that stupid. But if it comes from foreigners, I think there is a fawning non-Australian. And that fawning non-Australian, he thinks that if it's foreign, it's better than Australian. Obviously, that decision was made with motor cars. Obviously, that decision has been made with solar energy.
All right, thank you, Mr Katter.
If it's foreign, it's good. If it's Australian, it's not.
Okay, thank you, Mr Katter. Thank you for your evidence and appreciate your flexibility with your availability today.
Very great honour to be before the Senate inquiry, and I'm very, very proud that we've got people in the Senate that are prepared to inquire into what I think is a great and gross injustice. May God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr Katter.